Hey everybody, this is your instructor Kristen, and I'm going to be going into working with iMovie to edit digital video. And I know that the assigned tutorial has been going over Premiere, and the reason why I wanted to also add in this tutorial is because I wanted to give people who have never used a video editing program before the opportunity to work with something that's a little bit more user-centered and user-friendly, and also just kind of has a lot less kind of rabbit holes to fall into, I guess. So Premiere, along with Final Cut, and I think Sony has one that is pretty comparable to those two. Those are more professional entry video editing suites. They're very powerful. And they provide a lot of options, but for people who are just starting, they can be a little bit intimidating. So I wanted everyone to be able to watch and learn from the tutorial that Kelly Skye did. She was a past TA for this class, and she also is a professional filmmaker, and so she works with Adobe Premiere in a lot of her projects. So I wanted to give everyone that opportunity to learn that program and understand that program better from a more professional standpoint. But I also wanted to give everyone an option to work with a slightly more basic editor, but while it's basic and maybe a little bit more simple, it doesn't take away the fact, or it doesn't take away from the fact that it is still very powerful in terms of what it does allow you to do. So for these 15-second projects, working with iMovie, whether it's on your desktop or even just on your iPhone or your tablet, or working with a comparable Windows program is totally fine. We're only looking for 15 seconds of video, so you have a lot of options to create a couple of cuts and then export in some kind of format that you can then upload to YouTube. So I wanted to show people how to do that with iMovie. All right, so let's go here. Okay, so first step with iMovie, I'm not going to show you iMovie. I'm going to go into working with files that are coming from your phones. So I don't know what the software looks like for downloading images or videos from non-iPhone phones, so Android phones or any Windows-based phones. I don't know what that looks like, but I know the majority of people are working with Android or with iPhones, and I have heard that Android is a little bit easier. However, with Apple and any kind of Apple product, they really like to make you interface with another Apple program or another Apple product in order to actually utilize your media. So what usually is the default setting for most iPhones is as soon as you plug it into your computer to transfer files, it's going to open up Photos. So in earlier versions, it's going to open up something called iPhoto, and now it's just Photos. But what ends up happening is it will copy all of those media files to your computer, but they live in this weird spot on your computer where it's actually kind of hard to find them. So when you drag and drop something from this interface here onto your desktop or into another folder, when you're not actually transferring it from one location to another, you are copying it. So having not known this in the past, I worked with a lot of media that I've imported from my iPhone and is sitting in my iPhoto library. So I end up wondering what's happening to all of my hard disk space, and I find out it's because I'm not just transferring files, I'm duplicating them. So I wanted to show people how to actually get in control of those files. And the way to do that, so if you want to duplicate them, that's a totally fine way. You can just drag and drop literally onto your desktop like that, and you can do that with still images or with video. And I believe you can also do that with sound if you're working with iTunes. And that's the kind of the sound equivalent to Photos. So the other way to actually find these files is if you go up into the Photos preferences, you can say show in Finder, and then so this is actually the location of all of those files. So all of your photo files, which I think are all JPEGs, in terms of the iPhone capture format, and then all of your videos as well. And then you actually have to then do one last step, which is either right click if you're using a mouse, or control click if you're using the trackpad. And then you go to show package contents. And the actual images themselves are in this folder called masters, and they're going to be organized by the date. And I'm not going to actually go into that, but that is the core location of all of these files that you see in your iPhoto library. And that's how you can control those files, copy them, or move them around without actually just creating multiple duplicates. All right, so I'm going to close all this out. That was just a little quick kind of insight into where your media might be. I'm going to quit this. The other reason why I wanted to show that is because when you're working with iMovie, it will sometimes ask you, where are your videos? And they give you the option of using your iPhoto library, but I don't like to do that because what will happen is sometimes if you're not careful, it will just be pulling directly from that library instead of kind of working with things independently. So then if you end up moving things around, it can get complicated. And on top of that, if you end up editing things that you then actually accidentally save to the iPhoto library, it can change your base files. So I just like to know where my media is and where, in order to have the best control with it in terms of working with any kind of video editor, whether it's iMovie or Premiere or Final Cut. And so for this project, I've made my own folder. It's here on the desktop. It's called 15-second film. And inside of it, I have all of my video files. And so these are files that I took, videos that I took with my iPhone, and then I transfer them using the process that I just showed everyone. So now I know where those are, and now I'm going to work with them in iMovie. So I'm going to open this up. Takes a minute. Oh yeah, so this reminds me. The reason why you're not seeing my face right now, or the little video of me talking, is because since video editing is one of the most CPU intensive things you can do on a computer, I didn't want to then be adding in my webcam, which is surprisingly high res. And then also, so whenever I'm working on these programs and filming them, I'm running another program also on my computer that is capturing not only like the videos that the webcam is taking of me, but also the video of the screen and all the audio. So it definitely can be very CPU intensive for my little laptop. So I didn't want to add in the visual element. And on top of that, the audio was doing some strange things. So one big difference, and let me just preface this before I get into it, just something to keep in mind while you're watching this quick tutorial is what you are seeing is going to be exactly what you'll be seeing on your screen, with your video, obviously, if you're working with iMovie, but you're going to be also hearing the audio that is attached to all of your clips, and you're not going to be hearing that with this tutorial because I have my mic plugged in, and right now the software that I'm using to capture this video is not able to mix my mic audio with the audio that should be coming out of this video editor. So yes, I just want to let people know that when you're playing through things, and if there is audio with your video clips, you will hear it if you have the sound on. So that's going to be the one big difference between what you're kind of seeing in this video and what you might be experiencing with your own program. But everything else should be the same. So first I want to go to what your start screen is going to look like. This Mission Impossible here to the right is just a version that I've been playing with, just to make sure that I know some of the things to show everyone in this tutorial, and make sure that I don't totally mess up, but that still might happen. It's great. But what all of you are going to be seeing, especially if you haven't used iMovie before, is you're going to be seeing, if you open up in the Projects tab, and you can see that up here on the top, you're going to be seeing an option to create new. So probably if you're working on this project for the first time, you just want to start up a new project. And definitely just select movie. I know that trailers are shorter than movies, but for this project, you just want to think of it as a very short movie. Okay, so the first step that comes into working with video and video editors most of the time is importing video that you've already captured and filmed. Now, if you're working with live stream, kind of like what I'm doing right now, that is a little bit different. But for this project and for the most part, the first step with video editing is bringing in this kind of raw video that you now need to edit together. So the way to do that, in iMovie, it gives you some options. Over here on the left, it's going to show you, oh, here's your iPhoto, your photos library. It's going to show you libraries from past movies that you might be working on. But I always think it's best to just import the media that you need for that specific project and just leave everything else separate. So I always go to this big button here. You can also do the same thing by going up here and hitting the smaller one. But yeah, I just go to import media. And then it gives you options to find things, going to desktop. And so as I showed you earlier, I have that video on my desktop, and it's all my video files that are unedited. So these are just raw captures from my iPhone. These are all in a single folder. So I'm going to, I think I can just select this whole folder, and then it'll import everything in the folder. All right, and so that comes up into this little viewer here. And some cool things about this viewer. So it shows you all the files that you have. You can, if you find a file in here that you're like, oh, I totally know I'm not going to use that. That was a mistake. It's of my dog running through a field. It has something to do with this project. You can left click, and then you can just say delete media from event. And I think that can be helpful because, if you accidentally import a bunch of media that you're not going to need, it's just nice to know, what you have to pull from. And so as you select each of these, and I'm just selecting these by clicking them, you can kind of scrub through them, and you can see the timeline, and you see over here in this right-hand viewer, you can actually see each of the clips in their entirety. And while you have the clips selected in this kind of media library window, in this upper left-hand area, you can then go through and press the spacebar, and it'll actually play through every single raw clip. So this is showing all of the unedited clips that I captured thinking about this project. So I'm trying to recreate Mission Impossible 1 through 5, 6, 5. I don't even know how many there are right now. In 15 seconds. I think I'm going to be able to do it. Also, for those of you that are worried about, maybe having to act or having to have your friends act, I did this mostly, the only human actor in here is my hand, and then I have the voiceover that I added in the end. But this is a way, one strategy for doing a recreation without really using any people. So just keep that in mind. Maybe helpful, maybe not. Okay, so this is just going through all of the unedited clips. And then to kind of stop that, you either click one of these clips in the viewer area, or you just press the spacebar again. And that's something to remember in terms of a shortcut. It's so much faster to just press spacebar than to be over here and then to have to go over here and press play. And shortcuts are something that's really, really helpful for the overall, for the editing process, whether you're using iMovie or Final Cut or Premiere. Yes, shortcuts when you're editing video can really expedite that process. Okay, so now I have these videos, so I want to show a couple of the tools and processes that have to do with editing in the timeline. And so this is basically like the giant bucket that has all of my video. And then the way to start creating that into the video that I want to eventually make, I know it's going to be 15 seconds long, is that I have to start dragging these into the timeline and editing them. So this is, and what's surprising about this maybe not surprising, but what's really great about this is that while this is slightly more simplified in iMovie, this is the same process that you're going to be working with in Premiere and working with in Final Cut. You have a library or a collection of unedited clips, and then you are bringing them into a timeline panel or timeline window, and then editing them together, and then able to kind of view what those edits are looking like in terms of your project. So let's take this one. And so to do this, I am just dragging and dropping. And then let's say I want to have that. And then that. So right now that I have placed these clips into the timeline, I can press, once I have my cursor in this timeline panel, I can press the spacebar. And in the viewer up here to the right, it's just playing through the clips in order. So people are probably really used to this kind of interface at this point. But to reorder these, you can just drag and drop. So that's kind of the most basic way to create edits. And this is without changing the length of any of these original cuts. So potentially, let's see, right here at the top of this timeline panel, you can see it says 9 seconds. And then when you're pressing the spacebar and then stopping and pressing the spacebar again, you can kind of see where you're at in terms of the time. But let's see, so 9 seconds, I got another 6 seconds before I have 15 seconds. So I might want to have some slightly shorter cuts in here. So the next thing that I want to show is how to trim your clips and how to cut them. So one way to trim your clips is if you can go through here with using the playhead. Some people call this scrubbing. Some people just call this the timeline, where the cursor is at in terms of the time. But you can go through, and wherever you have a point in the time, you can then select. You can basically create that point in time by clicking, and then you can go up to modify, and you can say split clip. And so that's Command B, or Control B if you're on a PC. And what that will do is that will cut the clip in two. So now I actually have 2 clips, and if I wanted to, I could decide to delete one. And in iMovie, when you delete something, it will then fill that empty space with media. So you saw it just dragged these 2 clips up to the tail end of this first clip when I cut that portion out so that there isn't any blank space. That's not going to happen in Final Cut or in Premiere, but to me it's kind of a nice feature because I'm someone that likes to trim clips like crazy, and then I end up with little kind of like millisecond gaps sometimes. So that doesn't happen with iMovie. So that's one way to kind of shorten a clip. Another way to kind of work with 2 different clips and potentially the transition between the 2 in terms of the length of each clip in comparison to the other is if you go to there's this little kind of darker area in between the 2 clips and double click that, it opens up this close precision editor. And then it allows you to drag and further trim, and then it also will allow you to trim here. And so what this is doing is this, when you trim a clip, iMovie will actually remember the parts that you've trimmed. So you can, if you decide you don't like it, or you're a couple steps forward and you don't want to undo and lose all the work, but you want to extend it back to that 1 second that you accidentally clipped off, you can always double click on this, and then you can actually go back and go back to the area that you trimmed. Now that obviously you can't extend beyond what you have filmed originally, but this is kind of nice when you're editing things. So then if you want to keep these edits, so the part that is brighter, that's the part that is actually going to be showing in the final project. over here to the right. And then the parts that are kind of dimmer in this timeline panel and the close precision editor, those are the parts that you're actually kind of cutting away. So then I'm going to go up here and say close precision editor. And then that's actually going to complete those clips. So now I've just made very precise cuts to both of these two clips here, and been able to see how they're going to flow with one another. And if I wanted to go back to that, I could always double click, and then you can see, okay, so if I wanted to extend that, now let's say I wanted that to be a little bit longer. I didn't like how it played when the two were going together. I can do that. I can still see what I trimmed away, but is still actually here in these kind of dimmer spots on this editor view. And then when I'm done, I can just close that again and it will commit those trims. So now I have these two cuts, and this is going into the third cut, and I think I just want that to be faster, so I'm going to hit Command B and trim that, and then I'm going to delete. And another option is that you can just drag from the ends with these, and just like when you trim a clip and then delete a portion of it, when you're dragging the timelines on these from the ends of the clips, it will just fill in that spot. So now I'm starting from 0 seconds, and I've taken my 9 seconds and turned it into 3 seconds. So those are kind of the most basic things you can do in terms of editing and creating edits. So a couple of visual kind of suggestions for editing, especially if you're first starting to edit. Think about where the subjects are placed. You don't want to create disorientating, not sure which one, edits where, so for instance, this is in this scene, this is a different direction than the video, or sorry, the cassette player is in this. So that would be slightly confusing for the viewer. So if you're doing something like that on purpose and you want to confuse the viewer, that's fine. But you do want to kind of keep in mind that that kind of edit can be confusing because they're starting the shot, or they're starting this film sequence by seeing this cassette player in this orientation, and then here it's completely reversed. So that is a little bit confusing. So something like this might make more sense. And also because you actually see this cassette being placed in here, in some ways it makes more sense for it to be kind of closed and then open and the cassette going in. Oh, and then there's that. So let's see. So that's kind of out of sequence. So maybe you want to make a cut here. And then this way, as the cassette's going in and you have it from another angle, it still makes sense. So you're making more visual sense. And there's lots of strategies for how to help increase this. There's strategies for confusing the viewer, and it just really depends on what you want to do and what your intentions are. So let me show you how to make an edit to your video. And I have decided that I do not want to totally confuse my viewer, and I also want this to be reversed. So I want this to be rotated 180 degrees. So I'm going to show everyone how to work with effects in iMovie. And iMovie does give you some very basic effect options. So I'm going to select this clip where it is in the timeline. I'm going to go up here to this viewer window. I'm going to hit the cropping tool. And this allows you to crop your video, but it also allows you to rotate it. So this is especially useful if you have some vertical video that you accidentally shot and you didn't mean for it to shoot vertical, but it's sitting in your timeline over here, or sorry, your media folder over here as vertical. You can go and, let me select this one more time. You can go and rotate it. But since I'm trying to just flip this 180 degrees, I'm just going to rotate this twice. So now this has flipped my video. So in terms of trying to kind of give the viewer a little bit more direction and understanding of the scene, I have made it a little bit easier for them because now they can actually read that as a cassette player and it's facing the same direction as it is in the next shot. So in some ways, trying to compress feature-length film into 15 seconds might already be confusing enough for the viewer, so you might not need to disorient them anymore. But this is, so that's why I do want this to be as straightforward as possible. But again, these are just more stylistic choices that I'm making, and these are all things that you all get to decide as video editors and filmmakers for this project. So I just wanted to show people where those effects live. For this project, I would limit things to cropping. You don't need to get into color correction or color balance. And there's also some interesting speed settings. So if you wanted to do slow things down or speed things up, there's an option there as well. So you just have to remember to make sure that whatever clip you're trying to apply that effect to, that needs to be selected either in your media folder up here or down in your timeline. And then those changes will be applied to whatever clip is selected. One other thing in terms of editing clips I want to show. So with a lot of these, and you can't hear this because because of the sound issue that I talked about at the beginning, but a lot of these have ambient sound that, some of these have some sound effects that I did want to capture. And for those, I would probably use that audio. But a lot of this is just kind of dead audio that I was planning on having a voiceover and a musical track on top of. So, but I don't want to have maybe I was filming this outside and there was a dog barking or someone was walking by and the shot was perfect, but there is some random audio in the background. And this scene, this is a still of this cassette player. It's not supposed to have any audio with it anyway, in terms of the sound that was being produced by the shot. So I want to take away the audio from this, just in case there's any weird artifacts in here that I didn't mean to capture in terms of audio. But if I leave it in, it's definitely going to show up on the video, especially if I have other audio going. So I want to show people how to detach the audio from their video. So you select the video clip, and then you go up to, select the video clip, and then go up to modify, and then you can say detach audio. And that's also Option Command B, the shortcut. And then you have the audio down here, so you can treat this audio the same way that you can video. And so you've had multiple audio clips, so I'll do that here, Command Option B. You can swap these out, or I guess you can mix them together. Oh, look at that. The other thing you can do is you can just delete them if you don't want to deal with them, or if you maybe have some audio that you want, but you don't want it to be the loudest thing, you can go over here where you're within the audio clip and you see that little arrow. So that allows you to adjust the levels. And this will actually allow you to adjust the volume on that level, on that audio clip. I don't really care about that for this, so I'm going to just delete that because I do not want to have audio that's coming from this video. I'm going to insert a voiceover and audio separately. And that is actually going to be the next thing I want to show. So for those of you that might be narrating a voiceover, then that's something that's totally appropriate for this project if that's the strategy that you're going for. The way to do that is you can bring your timeline over to 0 in the timeline panel, and then you can go up here to this little record voiceover, and it will allow you to record a voiceover. So what is going to happen is it's going to play through the video, and then you can start recording. So I'm not going to be able to show the preview of this, but I just wanted to show people where this was. So let's say now it's giving you some cues, and it's starting. So I can be filming my amazing voiceover, and then I can stop it, and now that audio is down here. If you were listening to this on your machine and you didn't have a microphone plugged into it, you would be able to hear it. And I wonder if I could, well, I'm not going to mess with that. But just so you know, when you're playing through this now, you would be able to hear this on your machine, as long as you don't have something, some other audio device plugged in. Some people might want to use a microphone to do the voiceover, depending upon what kind of internal microphone you have in your laptops. I'm sure that for the most part, those are fine. But if you are using a microphone, you could capture this and then just unplug it in order to hear it. So I'm going to delete that just because I don't need it. Another way to bring in audio is you can import it. So you can go up to audio, and what it will do is it will, so iMovie has a list, a library of sound effects that you can bring in. And I can't really show these because, or illustrate these because, once again, you're not going to be able to hear them. But I do want to show people that that's where there is kind of this pre-made collection. And then you can also import things or MP3s directly from your iTunes. And then on top of that, when you go to your media, when you do the import, which is up here, if you have any kind of audio file in another folder, so if you have a .wav file, WAV, or .mp3, or even if you have, I think the voice recordings on the iPhone, they actually maybe save those as QuickTime audio files, which are .mov. You can bring all of those in when you do this import, and then it'll just show as audio files. And you can see here, it'll just show up like this. So you'll get this kind of waveform pattern that you can then drag and drop. And that's the voiceover that I captured. But yeah, I just, so don't feel like you, it has to be something that's coming from your iTunes. You can always import it directly from your desktop or from another folder or just another location of any kind of audio file. And I think that iMovie can deal with a lot of different audio files. So yeah, once again, it doesn't need to be something that's coming from your iTunes library, even though that is the easiest thing, again, because this is Apple and they just really want you to be tied into all of their different products. And iTunes is their audio product. Okay, so two last things. A couple more things I want to show. Another strategy sometimes that happens with editing is you can use different layers of video. And so this is similar to what happens with Photoshop, where you can have different layers of images. Same thing with Illustrator. You can have different layers of vector objects. When you're working with iMovie, you have a couple of different video layers that you can work with. I think, let's see how many it is. Okay, so it looks like you can only work with two. With programs like Final Cut and Premiere, I don't know if I've ever gotten maxed out, but a lot of times, especially with the style of video editing that I like to use, I will have probably like 5 or 6 layers of video that I'm working with. So what happens with this, and iMovie only has 2, but I have in this first layer down below here, I had this 3-second clip that I've been editing and working on, and then I just dragged in this other layer of video, this other clip that's now sitting on top of those. So now when I play through my project, you see that whatever video layer is on top is what's going to be visible. So let's change that one. Okay, I'm gonna actually bring this one down. So what I want, the effect that I want to produce here is I want to have, this shot here, and so this clip below this is just this kind of somewhat longer clip of this cassette player. And then what this clip is, it's one of the longer clips that I have, but it is of me panning across a very zoomed up and very blurry, which I could maybe change if I wanted to with some unsharp masks on it, but never mind. That's okay. Slightly blurry pan of the cassette tape, and on it is the name Mission Impossible And so this is kind of my version of a title screen that's incorporated into the action of this 15-second film. So what I want this to already be moving, and then I want this to just come up in really short little kind of millisecond intervals as the audience is kind of getting accustomed to and looking at the kind of long view of this cassette player. So first, I'm going to go to where this starts moving. Another suggestion for editing, when you're first starting to edit, it's always good to edit action to action or still to still. It can be very disorienting to edit action to still, or it's to still to action, but then to go to action to still. Well, basically, if you're going to have cuts, it can be good to be working with action, at least for one of the cuts, because the disruption that happens with a cut, whether it's from a still image to another still image, or a moving image to another moving image, there is some kind of disruption that happens, even if both of the scenes are still. So one method for making those jumps or those cuts a little bit less jarring to the viewer is to cut at least one thing on action. So when I say action, I mean instead of going from one still to another still, is going from a still image to something that's already moving. So I'm going to kind of scrub through this and see where it starts moving. I'm going to drop my timeline there. I'm going to split that. Going to split that. Huh. That's interesting. Trim. So I guess in iMovie, when you're working with the second layer, you can't split them. You have to trim. So I'm trimming. Okay. And then I'm bringing that over here. And then I want that to end there. Let me see. Okay, split clip. Maybe it just needs to be selected. It wasn't working. Okay. So now I have this actually happening on action, and I just want this to be interspersed. So I'm going to move this over here. And then I'm going to make a little spot here. And I'm going to trim that. And then I'm going to move this a little bit. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to be splitting this and not deleting anything, but I'm just going to be creating these intervals to then have this bottom layer kind of coming in below. So now when I play through this, and those are pretty fast. So what I think I might do is then bring the rest of that down there and then have a little bit more space here and play through. Okay, so that hopefully can give people just an idea of how you can use this second layer to work with just with visibility and to kind of fine-tune edits in ways that, let me then double-click this and then extend this. Yeah, all right, close that. In ways that you're not having to trim multiple clips. You can just use the clip on top to kind of create this disruption of a clip without having to trim the clip below. So by using the second layer, I have these really short clips above it, and I'm copying and pasting those right now. And instead of having to edit this spot here in this bottom clip and then edit this spot out and then insert this into there, by having this second layer, I can experiment with how these are going to look and the timing of them without having to totally disrupt these bottom clips. So it can be a really useful way of fine-tuning edits and experimenting with different editing choices without having to edit the majority of your clips or disrupt and split a ton of clips and working in just the same way it is with a bitmap image. You know, it's like you're not having to overwrite pixels on a single layer. you have the second layer to kind of play with so you can experiment with things. And then if you don't like them, you can just delete it or reposition things by dragging and dropping anywhere along the timeline. And it allows you to do that without disrupting the footage in the layer below. So that was kind of the last little editing trick or suggestion I wanted to show people. It can be a very powerful editing process, working with layers, and it really helps make things more efficient, but also encourages exploration. So it allows you to explore things in a way that isn't going to disrupt all your footage. So the last thing I want to talk about with iMovie is how you save this. So if you go up to File, you'll notice, and I learned this too, there isn't really a save. There is a share, and you can find your file, the project file, in your Finder. And so the way that most video editors work is that they save a file, and the file is considered a project file. And this is the same way, this is the same thing with iMovie as it is with Premiere and with Final Cut. So the file itself, that project file, it doesn't hold all of these raw clips. It doesn't hold this unedited footage, and it doesn't even hold this edited footage. It's basically holding the locations of this footage on your computer. So it's not like this clip is embedded into this project. What you're seeing here is just a little, like the behind the scenes of this video editor is, this is saying, oh, this clip is located in this part of the computer, or in this folder, in this location in the computer, and we're pulling it through where it's sitting on the hard disk, and we're showing it here. But when you save this instruction file, which is what I like to think of it, these project files are kind of like instructions and maps at the same time. All it's saving with this is the instructions. So it's saving the locations of these files. It's not saving the files themselves within that project file. So the project files are very small, because all they are a series of directions and locations. So these are all locations. Where is this audio file stored? Where is this video file stored? Where is this video file stored? This is why it's really important to keep as many of your media files in the same spot as possible, because what happens is if you accidentally delete one of these, so let's say you were pulling some of these from iMovie, some of these from iPhoto, and then you were in your iPhoto library and you accidentally deleted something, it would then, I think, it wouldn't show up here. Or if you accidentally moved one of the locations of one of these files into another folder on your desktop, when you went to reopen this, it would say, oh, this media is missing. We can't find this file. And so down here, if one of those files that you had accidentally moved was also used in the timeline, it would show up just as a blank thing. And until you were able to show the project file where that file's new location was, it will just be blank. The other thing that the project files save are these instructions. So they say, okay, in this timeline at 1.3 seconds, this clip is going to start at this location, and then it's going to end at this location in the clip. And then at 4 seconds, this clip is going to start. So it's just taking those locations and then assigning instructions to those locations of those video files. So it's really just a little bit of data, a little set of instructions and locations. It's not saving any of this video. So keep that in mind. The other thing that happens is if you move the project file, then it suddenly doesn't know where to find everything else, because these locations are dependent on that project file's location. So in terms of saving this, it saves automatically. Another thing you can do is you can go to projects, and you can, if this is the first time you've done that, you can save this. I'm going to call this Mission Impossible 02. I'm going to say OK. So now when you go back to view your projects in iMovie, you can see your different projects available. And so this one, because I just saved that for the first time, I can open that up. And now all of my clips are all here again, and the instructions are pointing. So all the locations are pointing to the right spots, and the instructions are telling iMovie, okay, so this is how this clip is going to play. This is how this clip is going to play. This is what's on layer 2. So that's kind of just in the nutshell what these project files are. And the last thing I want to show is how you actually export something, because there isn't really a very clear place to do that either. So you go up to File and you go to Share. And so instead of, I know that I'm asking people to upload these assignments to YouTube. The problem is if you do this within Apple, it then requires you to connect to YouTube from iMovie, and it imports a bunch of random iMovie data into your YouTube file. So since these videos are only 15 seconds, I'm actually going to have everyone, preferably I think it's better to have everyone share this as a file. And so this is essentially exporting this as a video file. And this shows you the options. So you can type this in and change it. You can change this as well. I would maybe say 15-second films or nothing if you don't want this to tag on your YouTube. Video and audio, you can choose if you just want the audio. Obviously this is a video project, so that should be video and audio. And then here are your resolution options. And this will probably change based on if you were using iMovie with some video that you captured from a digital camera or another device that maybe has slightly different dimensions, but for the most part, most phone cameras are going to be shooting in one of these. So go with the highest one that you have available. You want this to say hi, and I'm going to say better quality. Again, you would probably be changing these up because if this was a different length, but because you're working with a matter of seconds here instead of a matter of minutes or hours, it's totally fine to work with these settings. And for those of you that watched the Adobe Premiere tutorial, and this is also a question that's going to be on the final exam, yay, bonus for watching this. So we ask, what's the ideal codec to be working with, or to be compressing your video files to if you're going to be uploading them to a site that's going to stream them over the internet, and that is currently H.264. And that's something that you have a lot more control over in something like Adobe Premiere or in Final Cut. Your export settings you have way more control with those types of settings in those kind of more professional level programs. But because this is iMovie, because these are only 15 seconds, even though these aren't the ideal format to be uploading to YouTube, I'm saying that it's fine for this project because they're only 15 seconds. So ideally, you don't want to be uploading things that are have really high quality and don't have a certain bit rate, or have a really high quality compression codec, because H.264 is kind of optimized to work through streaming devices. But since these are only 15 seconds, I'm not worried about it. All right, so then you would hit next. And then this gives you the most important thing, where your file is actually going to be. So I would say just put it on your desktop if you don't have a folder, or if you do have a folder specifically for this project, just assign it to that and then give it a name that you know. So I'm saying Mission Impossible 15 seconds, so I know what it is. I don't just call it Untitled 04. I had to do that a lot of times before I finally realized that it wasn't helping me do anything faster. So I might have kind of long and descriptive file names, but when I'm searching through hundreds or thousands of files sometimes, it really helps to have things kind of numbered and have specific names. And that's the last time I'm going to bring that up. Haha, last week of the quarter. Okay, so then I press save, and then if I were to minimize this, I will then see that it shows up here on my desktop, and I can open that, and that's the file that you are going to be uploading to YouTube. Okay, so that is my relatively short iMovie video. So just a couple of reminders with iMovie. If you did not have a chance to name your project, you want to make sure to click that little tab at the very top that brings you back to the projects, and then it will give you an option to name your project. And then when you're trying to actually export your video, you need to go up to File and then go to Share and then Share as a file. And then once you export it, make sure that you see it on your desktop, or you can find it before you quit out of iMovie. If you can't find it, then you can always just reopen iMovie and then try and re-export. Okay.